The wind tore across the plains, whipping dust and dry grass into Mara's face as she ran, her dress clinging to her in the early morning chill. Her chest heaved with every desperate step, and the hem of her gown snagged on the splintered boards of the ranch's weathered fence. She barely noticed, her mind consumed by one thought. She would not be forced into a life she had never chosen. The thought of the chapel, the veil, the rings, and the man she did not love made her stomach twist with a mixture of fear and determination. She had rehearsed this moment for months in her mind, imagining every escape, every misstep, every chance she might get to reclaim her freedom. And now it had come. Her fingers tightened around the thin fabric she held in her hands, and her gaze darted toward the figure standing near the barn. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a rugged face carved from years of sun and wind. His eyes were sharp and watchful, fixed on her as though he could see into her very soul. Cole Thorne, the rancher who had saved her from a near-fatal accident just days before, had become an unspoken presence in her flight. She had initially thought she might evade him, disappear before anyone noticed, but something in the way he had looked at her, the way he had treated her with cautious respect, made her hesitate. She slowed just enough for him to call her name. "Lila," he said, voice steady and commanding, carrying across the dust-filled air. "Stop, don't come any closer. This isn't safe." She spun, hair whipping across her face, and faced him. "Safe?" she demanded, anger and frustration ringing through her words. "Safe is the chapel, the vows, the life I never wanted? I'm not safe there. I'll be trapped, a prisoner in my own wedding dress." Cole's expression softened, but his tone remained firm. "I understand your fear. I understand your choice to run. But you're risking more than just your freedom out here. You could get hurt, Lila. You could lose everything before you even have a chance to live." She laughed, a short, bitter sound, almost mocking. "Lose everything," she said, voice trembling. "I've already lost everything they thought I had, and I'd rather risk dying than spending one more second as someone else's possession." Cole took a careful step forward, his shadow stretching toward her as he tried to bridge the distance without alarming her. "I need you to hear me."
"I care about you, Lila. That's why I'm saying this."
He hesitated, swallowing, and his voice grew softer, tinged with a weight she wasn't expecting. "I could be your father." The words hung heavy in the air, a mixture of warning, concern, and unspoken authority. Mara froze for a heartbeat, and then, in a defiant whisper that carried farther than she expected, she shot back, "You're not. You're not in charge of my life. You don't get to decide what I can or cannot do." Her words cut sharper than any blade, and Cole felt the sting, not as a threat, but as a revelation. She was fire, wild and untamed, refusing to be subdued or defined. He stepped back slightly, giving her the space her courage demanded. She felt the first tremor of relief, not because he had retreated, but because he had recognized her autonomy, her right to choose, and the strength she carried beneath her fear. The wind caught the edges of her dress and tugged at her hair as she planted her feet firmly in the dirt, breathing heavily. "I am not a child," she continued, voice rising with conviction. "I am not a prize to be won or a life to be controlled. I am Lila, and I make my own choices." Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted inside him. The girl who had run across his ranch earlier in the week, the one he had only known in fragments, was now a woman who demanded to be seen in full. Her fear, her anger, her defiance, they were not signs of weakness. They were proof of a spirit that refused to be broken. He nodded slowly, letting his gaze linger on her face, the determination in her eyes, the tremor of tears threatening at the edges. "I see you," he said finally, voice low but unwavering. "All of you, not as a child, not as a bride to be controlled. I see your strength, your fire, your courage, and I will respect it, always." Relief mingled with disbelief surged through her chest. She blinked, staring at him, trying to absorb the sincerity in his words. For the first time, she felt that she was truly seen, not as a possession, not as a responsibility, but as a human being with her own rights, her own voice, her own power. The wind seemed to shift around them, carrying away some of the tension, leaving a strange stillness. Lila took a careful step forward, her cane brushing against the ground, and Cole didn't move. She measured the distance between them, realized that she could trust him, and spoke again, quieter this time, almost afraid her newfound strength might evaporate if she said it aloud. "I don't need anyone to protect me," she said softly. "I just need someone who respects me enough to stand beside me, not in front of me, not over me." Cole's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. He took a step closer, offering his hand without imposing. "Then I'll stand beside you. Not to lead, not to control, not to command, but to be with you. To see you as you are, and to honor that." Her fingers brushed against his hand, tentative at first, and then firm, a silent agreement forming between them. She felt a shift inside her, a sense of possibility she had never dared to imagine. The sun rose higher, casting golden light over the plains, illuminating the dust swirling around them, and the determination etched on her face. In that moment, Lila realized that running had not been enough. She had to claim her own life, her own choices, her own voice. And with Cole beside her, not as a father, not as a guardian, but as an ally, she could finally begin to do so. The wind carried her whispered vow across the empty ranch, words only she and Cole would fully hear. "I am not yours to save. I am not yours to command. I am myself, and I will live my life on my terms." Cole nodded, the corners of his eyes crinkling as he acknowledged the fire in her words, the freedom in her stance, and the courage that had carried her this far. Together they watched the plains stretch into the horizon, a landscape of possibility, danger, and hope, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it side by side as equals, and as witnesses to the power of a spirit that refused to be broken. The next morning, the ranch was alive with motion, the sun barely peeking over the distant hills as horses neighed and the faint scent of hay mingled with the crisp air. Lila moved with a sense of purpose she had never known, each step across the wooden planks of the barn carrying confidence instead of fear. Cole watched from a distance, leaning against the fence, his arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He had expected her to falter, to shrink back under the weight of her own courage, but she didn't. She was steady, deliberate, and unapologetically herself. He felt a pang of pride, tempered by a cautious respect for her independence. This was her journey, not his, and he knew the balance between guidance and interference was delicate. He reminded himself that the moment he tried to control her, even with the best of intentions, he would betray the very trust she had placed in him. Lila approached the horses, brushing the dust from their coats and speaking to them softly. She had always loved animals, drawn to their honesty, their loyalty, their simple but profound existence. Here, among creatures who judged no one, she could breathe freely. Cole came closer, holding a halter for one of the horses she had been hesitant to touch. "You've got away with them," he said quietly, almost as if speaking too loudly would break the magic of her connection. Lila glanced at him, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Maybe they sense that I'm not easily bossed around," she teased. Cole laughed softly, a sound of genuine warmth. "Or maybe they just know courage when they see it." Her chest swelled with pride, though she quickly masked it with a shrug, as if such acknowledgement still made her uncomfortable. She had lived so long hiding in the shadows that even compliments felt unfamiliar. But Cole's eyes were steady and honest, and for once, she didn't doubt them. As the day wore on, word came from the town. The wedding party she had fled was still searching, and some villagers whispered about her recklessness, painting her as a spoiled, uncontrollable girl. Lila felt the old familiar sting of judgment, but she refused to let it sink in. She had survived worse than gossip, worse than fear, worse than the expectation that she belonged to someone else's life. She had the choice now, and choice had power. Cole approached her later in the afternoon, his expression serious. "They're asking questions," he said. "People want to know why you left, and some of them won't like the answer." She met his gaze without flinching. "Let them talk. I didn't run for their approval. I ran to claim my life." Cole nodded, impressed by her resolve. "You've changed, Lila, stronger than I imagined, and I'll stand with you, even if the world doesn't understand." The words reminded her that she didn't have to face everything alone. But she also realized that support didn't mean surrendering control of her life. She could accept help without giving up her independence, a lesson she had learned the hard way. By late afternoon, a storm gathered over the plains, clouds darkening the sky, wind stirring the fields, and tension creeping into the air. Lila glanced at the horizon, sensing both danger and